faiths apart is how should we regard these texts today? Should we believe, for instance, that a loving God could condemn those who offend him to an eternity of torture? Does hell exist? And if it does, how do you picture hell?
My concept of hell, I suppose, is being stuck with myself forever and with no way out. Whether anybody ever gets to that point, I have no idea. But that it's possible to be stuck with my selfish little ego for all eternity, that's what I would regard as hell.
So hell may not exist, and if it does, it's not a place of torment and burning, it's being thrown back on yourself.
Which is torment enough, I think, if you think about it.
But in the Christian Gospels, hell is real. No ambiguity, no room for gentle speculation. Jesus himself spells it out. The fires of hell, the torments that await the damned. The Quran also has vivid descriptions of hell and a paradise. Lovingly evoked in this Iranian palace, built to represent the gateway to heaven as described in the Quran. Lush greens, shaded couches, flowing fountains, and wide-eyed virgins in permanent attendance. Are these descriptions to be understood literally?
The Quran, in this dimension, is talking to Arabs living in the desert. And it's just portraying to them, it will be the fulfillment of your human desires. Everything that you want, everything which is, good for you now, you will find it in paradise. So these are metaphors, images of something which is, this is where God will welcome you if you are faithful to his message.
Well, let's move from paradise, which started this discussion. How should we regard the punishment specified in the Quran? Lashes, crucifixion, or the injunction that permits a husband to beat his wife? I mean, how should we approach this?
No one can deny the fact that corporal punishment are in the Quran, and even, killing someone, what we call today the death penalty, and this is in the Quran. Even stoning is in the prophetic tradition, and beating the wife is. There is one verse, there is a mention of this, so we cannot deny this. So my position on this is that you cannot read this verse literally. You have to put it in the whole context of the revelation and to be able to say at the end, beating your wife is against the Islamic tradition, it's against the Islamic message.
But the literal truth of the sacred texts has been the central premise of all the great faiths for hundreds, if not thousands of years. All Christians must accept the authenticity of every word attributed to Christ in the Gospels. And even today, millions and millions of Christians worldwide believe in the Genesis account of a six-day creation. For Muslims, the Quran is the Word of God as dictated by the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad. It is not a commentary, it is not the work of men inspired by God, it is the voice of God. And Orthodox Jews are required to believe absolutely in the divinity of every single word of the Torah, corresponding to the first 5 books of the Old Testament in the Christian Bible. The Torah was the gift of God to Moses on Mount Sinai. How does one reconcile these ancient texts with the insight science has given us and a moral sense that is continually evolving?
I think we need to come to the Bible with enormous openness, eagerness to be taught. Now, that doesn't mean, I think, that you have to regard every single verse of Genesis, let's say, as recording history in the sense we now understand it.
My point is really also to be able to change the Muslim mentality. My first step for me is today to say we have to stop all that and to come with some scholars and all the scholars we can and to start again this interpretation of these verses.
I don't believe that you can have a religion without that sense of interpretation. Fundamentalism is the attempt to move from text to application without interpretation. And that is something Orthodox Judaism regards as heresy. Simply to treat the Bible literally is, the rabbis say, a form of heresy.
So nothing is static in religion. Things are continually changing and evolving.
We believe in Judaism that God discloses himself through the arena of time.
Free yourself from literalism, and the conflict between science and religion is over. The discovery of our diminished status in the universe, which traumatized the Catholic Church for centuries, can now be seen as the revelation of the full extent and majesty of God's creation. Even evolution can be seen as God's design. But is it that easy? Darwin himself wrestled with the implications when he wrote, "Creation offers nothing but blind, pitiless indifference, in which each form is utterly destroyed while others take its place." Can we really believe that this pitiless process is the creation of a loving God?
Things die so that other things shall be born. I don't see that as tragic. I think that is the condition of love, of meaning, of joy, and of hope.
I think that the Darwinian picture of a pitiless creation is what I sometimes think of as a 3 o'clock in the morning picture of the world. We all have those moments of thinking this is all so futile, it's all going to end, and it's full of suffering. And yet, looked at from another perspective, we are capable of meaning, of love, of relation, of prayer, and that is valuable whether or not it lasts forever.
Capable of meaning, love, and relationships, yes, but creation is pitiless in its design. We're programmed to degenerate and die, to shuffle painfully out of the way so that others may take our place. If I may share a very personal experience, my mother died recently after an 8-year slide into dementia that left her unable to speak, unable to eat without assistance, unable to recognize anybody. Conditions like hers not only raise questions about God's design, but the very idea of an immortal soul. At what stage, I kept asking, did her spirit leave us?
Well, I've also sat close to a family member in that situation, and there are few things more painful than to watch somebody, as it were, disappearing in front of your eyes. Whatever happens in those dreadful periods where you can't relate to someone's identity any longer, what happens isn't that the body's left and something has gone somewhere else, but that God may very well be dealing with people at levels we can't begin to imagine or understand. It's the best sense I can make of it, but it's brutally difficult.
For me, only one thing is certain. Our 5 religious thinkers are among the most engaging, intelligent, honest, and compassionate men it has ever been my privilege to meet. Perhaps that was to be expected. The surprise, though, was to discover how much closer they are to each other than to many of those who claim to share their beliefs. Whether this coming together is evidence of God's guiding hand or something we might call the human spirit at its best remains a matter of faith.
What was the relationship between Princess Margaret and a member of the criminal underworld? The Princess and the Gangster, tomorrow at 8. Followed at 9 by Kwame Kwei-Armah, heading down under as he retraces the Queen's historic tour of 1953. Next tonight on 4, Ron Atkinson and Tessa Sanderson, a celebrity wife swap.